Doing well. The season's flying by. Like I'm sure you feel the same way where it's like, we look and it's like November and now it's like the Four Nations break already, eh?
Yeah, it's always for me, it's always the lead up, as you get through November, that lead up to Christmas. And then, you have the short, quick Christmas break. And the next thing everybody is looking towards is the trade deadline. And, obviously this year with the Four Nations break coming up within a couple of games here. I mean, it's quick downhill from here to sprint to the finish.
Hmm. Hack, I always like to talk to guys that have been part of the Maple Leafs organization. You've been in the hockey world for a long time, major program in North Dakota, the Philadelphia Flyers, different organizations, and you spent some years in Toronto as part of the Maple Leafs. Can you shed some light on what's different about that? Maybe what makes it hard to win in that market?
Well, it's hard to win everybody. I mean, and you know that, right? I mean, one team every year wins. I mean, especially you get to this time of year, right? And we're all looking at, how can you improve your team? Everybody, in media wise, looking at the 32 teams and what should they do? What can they do? In Toronto, that's you just take that and multiply it, right? And I got to be honest with you, I don't know how much it affects, especially this current Leafs team. You got a group there they've been through it now. They've got some battle scars. You got a guy leading behind the bench that's gone through it, at every different level. So I got to think this year the noise is a little bit less in terms of the effect of that on this group. But time will tell and will show.
Well, that's the big thing. We have that debate on a daily basis. It's all about the Stanley Cup playoffs, unfortunately. Well, it looks different under Chief. What have you made of the way this team has looked so far this season?
Yeah, just real steady in the way, in the way they're doing things. You see, in terms of their play without the puck, I mean, they're above the play a lot. They're hard, they're difficult to play against defensively. They're a little different, right? Under Kiefer, there was probably a little bit more puck pressure, up ice in certain areas. And to the credit, those teams were good defensive teams as well. This team's just a little more, I guess a little more settled in playing those tight 1-goal games. They look very comfortable doing it. You look at their stats, goals for, goals against, the underlying numbers are all there. It's a group that looks pretty comfortable in the tight games as you get into the last 10 minutes of hockey games. Getting great goaltending from, once they have Stoli back, they've got two guys that they seem like they can rely on. Stoli's he's got some war wounds, right? He's been through it in terms of injuries and winning. You got Joey Wall coming on and really showing that he can get the job done at this point in time. And seems like those guys have a lot of confidence in him.
Yeah, speaking of Stolia, I played with him probably in like 2016. He was a young kid. All big goalies that can move have potential at that time, but I didn't realize that he could get to the level where we've seen him play this year. Hopefully, he can pick up where he left off. But what do you think of Stolia with your time in Philadelphia, having him in your organization and what he's developed into?
He's not a guy that I'm going to cheer for harder, just because of the things that he's been through to get to where he's at today. I'm not going to get into the injury history and some of the things that he had to do to come back from some of those procedures that he went through as a young guy. A lot of times that can just knock you right off course, right? And that can push you the other direction. But it seems like it's added maturity to what Stoli is doing. And that's a huge part as a goaltender, especially a goaltender in the city that he's playing in, right? Just mentally, he's a guy that's earned it. He knows he's done the work. Now you're starting to see the level of play. Is he surprising everybody a little bit with the level of play that he has been able to produce on a consistent basis? Maybe, but I bet he's not surprising himself because he's a good man that's done a lot of work to get himself to this level.
Hack, I wanted to ask you about Morgan Rielly. It's been a very difficult season. We all know that. I think certainly if the Leafs are going to do something substantial this spring, Rielly has to be back to Rielly from a couple years ago, specifically that series against Tampa. I thought he was awesome. But what was it like working with Morgan Rielly on a daily basis? And when he's at his best, what is he doing properly and correctly?
I know Mo. The first thing, like Mo owns it, right? He doesn't try to duck it and hide from things. He doesn't push things off on his teammates and things like that. You know, especially at this point of his career, like I believe there's a real maturity to him. The one thing I'm not going to make a judgment on his offensive game because I haven't watched him closely enough this year. But you know, when the numbers start getting, you know, thrown around in terms of your plus minus, and you got to hear that every day. For me at this point in time, you know, Mo's he's got to address, you know, one or two little things in his game that, you know, he feels he can shift, or, you know, he can improve to a certain degree. Beyond that, block out the noise and go play. When he's playing simple, let's be honest, you like when he's trusting his instincts, using his feet, and, you know, being on the aggressive side of how he plays the game, that's when he's at his best. You know, not overthinking things. Just go out and let his natural instincts and his, you know, his skating ability, his talents, let him go. That helps him defensively, and it makes him, you know, it makes him a real good player offensively as well.
Mm-hmm. Hack, you know, Willie Nylander has been a story this year. He's having a phenomenal year. He's just shooting out the lights, and he seems to be one of the players with the most personality on that team that we can see from the outside anyway. As an assistant coach in Toronto, I think that you get a chance to maybe get to know the guys and rub shoulders and BS a little bit more than you do as a head coach. Did you get a chance to get to know Willie a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, he's so comfortable in who he is, right? He's a unique individual, and he owns it, right? You know, I mean, Willie always fought, especially early in his career, and, you know, some of the contract things and stuff like that. He you know, I think he always fought, you know, the persona on the ice that, you know, some nights he wasn't competing as hard as he should. And, you know, there's the way he plays the game. There's nights when, you know, maybe it looks a little bit that way, but this is a guy that when you watch him, some of the things people don't know. I mean, this guy works at his game in behind the scenes. He you know, he does extra work before practice, after practice, all the stuff that guys do. I mean, we're not patting him on the back for that, but he works at his game. I think he knows the holes that, you know, that he has, and he's worked to improve them. But the personality that he brings, I think, is awesome for a dressing room. When things are, you know, things get a little hairy, things get maybe there's a little bit of heat coming. Willie's not going to feel any of that. You know what I mean? And he's protect that guys around him, and that helps the bunch. So I love what he brings, and you know what? Proofs in what he's done in the playoffs. Right? The guy's been a great player in the playoffs, and now you're seeing him do it the entire regular season this year.
Got swagger, that is for sure. And Willie Nylander having an outstanding season for this Maple Leafs team. So obviously you've got connection to the Seattle Kraken team. I wanted to ask about Brandon Tanev. You talked about it off the top. It is deadline season. Seattle just seems like a team that would make a lot of sense to maybe make a trade with if you're the Maple Leafs. But Brandon Tanev, you think he'd be a good fit in Toronto?
Well, it's all about exactly that fit. You know, what role is is Chief looking for? Do the Leafs want? You know, Turbo. He's got the nickname in Seattle Turbo for a reason. That's the level that he plays at every night. Ton of passion. He brings pace, tenacity. He's a real good penalty killer. Not just because of the pace that he brings, but he's got a good understanding of what it takes to kill within different systems in the league. So, you know, he's a guy that what you see, that's what he brings day in and day out to, you know, into a team. So, in terms of the fit, for sure, he's a guy that I think can, you know, go and he can help a lot of teams. You know, only the guys that are there that are, you know, gonna flip the switch and make the deals are gonna know if he's the exact right fit for them. But when he's with when he's with a centerman that fits for him, and in a role that fits for him, he's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Two other guys that a lot of talk has been made, rightfully so, this year, kind of the heartbeat of this team in a lot of ways, with Mitch Marner and John Tavares. You know, whether they re-sign or come back, or their term in Toronto continues on, do you think it's all dependent on what happens in the playoffs this year? Has it boiled down to just that?
You know, I think that's probably the easy view of it. And they're both in different situations, right? Like JT is, you know, he's not, you know, he's getting towards, you know, the back part of his career. You know, what I see is a guy that he's able and willing to adapt his role. And you can't show that in any greater way than, you know, what happened with the C earlier this year, and how that transition, you know, was made from him to Maddie, and how JT handled all of that. So, as you get longer in your career, you have to find ways to adapt and play different roles, and that's going to be up to whether John Tavares wants to do that and wants to be in Toronto in possibly a little bit of a shifting role. Mitch, for me, I'm just a believer in this guy's one of the best players in the league, and some of the things that he does on a daily basis for me are they're special. So when we start talking about and I'm not talking about the Leafs or Mitch necessarily in particular, when you start talking about you've got one of the best players in the league, one of the most dynamic, guy that does a lot of things. I think you have to be very careful in allowing that player to leave your organization, because a lot of times you're going to spend the next 10 years or longer trying to find somebody that's able to bring those abilities. So I love Mitch. There's a lot more to him behind the scenes than people might know, and not really my place to talk about it, but he's a pretty good team guy that that brings things together. And again, you go through all the ups and downs that this group has gone through. It's hard to win. They're expected to win this year, and I'm sure they expect themselves to do that. The reality is only one team at the end of the year is gonna walk away winning the last game. So I'd hate to have it all put on what the result of the playoffs is, but obviously that's going to have an impact. Yeah, absolutely, Rosie.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. I mean, imagine being in that footing, and you have been, where it's like the regular season really doesn't matter. It's all about like those 7 games in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll leave on a lighter note. During the pandemic, I had a chance to be the Leafs radio host in the Blueprint and the Amazon series. Joe Thornton, like, people forget Joe Thornton was a Toronto Maple Leaf. What was it like to have Joey T in the room?
You know what? I just had a chance to spend some time with him over at the Spengler Cup. And I mean, just awesome. Like, from the second, back in Toronto, from the second that Jumbo would walk in the facility, in the practice facility in the morning, coaches were all in there early, but usually one of the first guys, that was in there every morning, because he just loved being at the rink. I mean, Jumbo, and when he walked in the rink, you knew it. You heard him, you felt it. Just that presence that he brought was awesome. And you know what? He's like that today. I mean, he's a guy that just loves being around the boys, loves being around the rink, and loves the competitiveness of the game. So pretty special individual, obviously Hall of Famer in terms of his career, but even more special human being and what he brings into the facility every day.
I heard he's an absolute beauty for multiple guys, and apparently he makes nicknames, like random nicknames for everybody. Is that true?
He comes up with a lot. Yeah. I mean, it just rolls out of him. Put it that way. It's all natural. He doesn't have to work at it. It's just how he is. And he's just, he's one of those guys everybody wants to be around. He just draws people in. And there's never a bad day when Jumbo's around.
Hack, this has been a lot of fun. It's so great catching up with you. And obviously you offer the unique insight of having been in the trenches with this team. Really, really appreciate your time, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Anytime. Look forward to it. Thanks, and have a great day there.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.